Ian Linton.
Cheers, Dougie. Leisure Trust as well for me.
Could see Jackie.
Yep, Leisure Trust.
Other Jackie.
Yeah, hi, I don't think it is mentioned, but just for completeness, Visions Board.
Okay. I think that's...
We pick up on standard ones.
Okay, anyone's will try and pick up where we can. And Jim, sorry, Jim.
Same as Councillor Todd, Visions as well.
Okay, we'll go to item number 2 now. We'll go to East Ayrshire Performance, and Joe, if you want to begin the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This is the third East Ayrshire Performance of this financial year. It builds on the information I provided in earlier reports, and it starts off with, as always, the note on the value of the general fund uncommitted balance, sitting at around that £9 million mark, 2.5% of our net revenue expenditure. It will increase by £150,000 if Cabinet this morning are minded to agree the recommendations contained in the balances report shown on agenda as agenda item 3E. And I can talk more about that as we go through that other report. But the balance sitting there 2.5% and towards the lower end of that threshold of 2 to 4%. It's a report that touches on the savings that were agreed by Council way back in March. And it shows at paragraph 8 just some of those, 2 of those savings that were agreed that are not being achieved at this point in time. They are relatively immaterial in value, and the service has taken additional steps to find that saving from elsewhere, noting that once certainty and stability is brought around the current issues facing the service relating to COVID, that those savings will be achieved in due course. Chair, when I presented the last report, I noted in the revenue section that the services continue to feel the financial experience as well as the operational issues that relate to COVID. I also said that we had services that at that previous report were flagging an overspend this year, but that we had heard announcements of planned Scottish Government recurring COVID money. And so this report before you today has that information contained within it and the figures adjusted for it. In the last report, Education Service was sitting with an overspend. This time, because of receipt of £2.6 million of COVID recovery funding, which is recurring, then that service is now flipped into just under £1 million of an underspend. It doesn't detract from the issues that the service is facing in terms of pressures on its core budget. It has noted that in terms of the pressures being felt in school transport, particularly in additional support for learning transport, around £750,000 of a financial pressure exists and has been incurred by that service as they go through this year. At the same time, pressures around decants, which are in this report but which will now be capitalised going forward, means that although the service is sitting with an underspend of £1 million, that's attributed to the new money that we received, which is for education recovery, essentially for teachers. And so this, while it's welcome at this point in time, is essentially shielding the service from the pressures that it's facing in terms of COVID. And hopefully, as we go through the next financial year, we'll be able to see those pressures being alleviated. In Communities and Economy, at the last report, this range of services, again had an overspend highlighted. Through the work of the service and through the pooling of resources, then that service now plans to end the year underspent by around £300,000. But that's after taking account of Cabinet giving approval to utilise £1.7 million of COVID non-recurring funding to help with those budget pressures, particularly in roads and parking income, in waste, in terms of the issues around restrictions and the loss of income, and also the operational impact of restrictions on the number of operatives that can be placed in vehicles. And in health and social care, at the last report, we spoke that that Health and Social Care at that point in time planned to end the year with an underspend of around £1.7 million. This service also received a significant amount of COVID funding in the last month. That funding again is recurring and it values at £2.8 million. It means that Health and Social Care is anticipated to end the year around £4.7 million underspent. Now, it's easy to come to the conclusion that service budgets are doing well. They are challenged, members. And in Health and Social Care, that £2.8 million of funding that was received is predominantly for winter pressures. Some of that funding coming in through health and some of that being allocated directly to the council for onward transmission to the partnership. But it doesn't detract from those pressures that the service experiences. And paragraph 12 before you today highlights the range of essentially unusual pressures that the service is having to sustain. For example, supporting the residential care homes to the tune of £1.9 million and PPE, and as well as you know from briefings from the Chief Executive and also from the Director of Health and Social Care, that additional money has been placed to provide additional care at home staffing as well. At the same time, and just to add another layer of complexity, the partnership are also planning to submit their mobilisation plan, their final mobilisation plan. And so at this point in time, we have a range of revenue services, and I would probably anticipate, members, that as we get towards year end, every service will at least break even. So against this backdrop of unusual and really extensive pressures, services are sitting with underspends, but those underspends are due to predominantly large-scale COVID recovery funding that's been given. That has got a purpose and has got conditions attached to it, and it's just the timing of those services in terms of moving forward with those funding pressures. As we move away from the service revenue budgets and move on to paragraph 14 to Newmilns Food Festival, members will recall that way back in December 2020, you gave approval for two pieces of funding, £10,000 each, to be provided for the Food Festival to allow the festival to take place in 22 and 2023. The report before you today asks you to bounce one of those payments and essentially to make that run from 23 through to 2024. Paragraph 15 through to 17 picks up on the really good work that's been undertaken by colleagues across the council and also in the local business associations in relation to the Shop Happy app and that virtual high street that allows businesses to essentially sell and to promote their products to the market. It notes that 142 businesses are registered and that it's made a real difference. The report asks members today to approve some match funding for the first ever joint venture between the Kilmarnock and the Kilmarnock Business Associations for Shop Happy to extend the use of that app into 2022-23 and into 23-24 to allow those businesses to continue to grow and to sell their products and demonstrate their products to the markets and to the communities. In the capital section, we note the work that's been done in terms of the former bus garage in Ayr Road, Kilmarnock, to form the new waste management and outdoor amenities depot. It notes that because of challenges around supply chain and commodity price increases, that the final price of that work will exceed its tender price by £60,000, and noting that additional sum can be contained within the overall capital allocation. Paragraph 19 and 20 sets out a bit of background in terms of adaptations to domestic properties, and there is listed at paragraph 19. It notes that at the time the work was planned, Tier 1 restrictions were in place, and as a result, the access to the homes was extremely restricted and the planning of the work was challenging. Now that contractors can get into the houses, it's been found that there are other issues in terms of structural repairs and unrecorded utilities, as well as some changes by the client. And as a result, the price for this work has essentially almost doubled from 81,000, and it's being noted that that increase can be contained within the equipment and adaptations budget, a budget that's transferred from housing from the partnership. And in Dunlop Early Learning and Childhood Centre, we note that work's ongoing to divert the burn, but we also see that Scottish Power now have an ask to divert some of their utilities, and as a result of that, that cost of that contract will now increase by around £25,000, and again that can be contained within that early years budget. Paragraphs 22 and 23 notes the work that's been done by the Leisure Trust in conjunction with colleagues in facilities and property management. It's really an exciting piece of work where the Leisure Trust are using their ability to attract external funding and to do so in a really innovative way that augments the work that's been done by not only by the Leisure Trust but also by the council. It notes the projects that they're planning to support in terms of Darvel Town Hall, and also a proposal for the reuse of the Civic Centre South building. In order for this work to take place, they're asking Cabinet today for approval of an allocation of £20,000 per project to be provided to allow feasibility work to be undertaken, and that balance can be contained within the communities and economies balances. Chair, with your approval, I'm happy to take the people section and health and safety section in the wider report that accompanies this, and to stop there and see if members have any questions on the points raised so far.
Okay, I've got a couple myself, just in terms of the COVID recovery, and it looks, on paper that pretty healthy, but obviously we've got to be concerned about inflationary pressures, contract inflation, energy costs, wages, still outstanding pay claims, etc. Have we got things covered? Basically, I'm looking for a wee bit of assurance in terms of. I don't think I think we're as good a position as any council, but just where are we with those pressures? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And those specific items will be covered in greater detail in the budget report. And that budget report is a bit like this station performance report. It's telling a really conflicted story. It's telling a story of a core budget that is in extreme pressure. And the grant from the Scottish Government will result in a balanced budget, but a balanced budget that will be after a series of reductions take place. And so that part is pressured. But we also have a part of the budget that has this COVID one-off money that is substantial, but we have plans for that, and again that will be demonstrated in the budget. And what we saw in the last month is the recognition that in some elements of our services, particularly education and health and social care, the tail of COVID is a long way away, and in fact the recovery from COVID will last throughout next year, and so the government giving that recurring money to make that happen and to support those services going forward. So at the same time when we are making expenditure reductions, we are seeing services at least breaking even and probably some showing significant underspends, and it's weaving that story in that budget report, particularly at a time when inflation is higher than it's been for probably the last decade, and we're now hearing some conflict around whether or not that's a short-term thing, that inflation rate, or whether that will last longer than anticipated. Things we're looking at, and they'll be in greater detail in the budget. And then pay awards, where pay awards for this year are agreed with the exception of teachers. And as we go into next year's budget, and again explained further in the budget report, we do have those issues where we have live claims, and we have inflation at a level where certainly it's not been for many years. In terms of assurance, we have a general fund uncommitted balance around £9 million. I've got to be honest, it's low and it needs to be built up, and we'll take steps to do so. And at the same time, we need to look at the lasting effects of COVID and COVID in our communities, and particularly around the pressures that they are feeling. And in doing so, that will be captured in another report that members will be asked to consider as part of the budget as well.
Sure. And of course, some of the pressures are not just COVID. It's a lot. Some of it's getting Brexit done, and I think we've seen a increase in labour and materials costs and other costs. And I don't know. I don't think we know the full extent of that yet. And I think we've got to be aware of that, just and bear that in mind when making the future decisions. Just a couple of wee minor points. Just. To mention just about Shop Happy, I went to Current Business Association, I think with Councillor McMahon, and we got a presentation in Shop Happy. And I also went to Comark Business Association, and it's good to hear that cooperation. And I know that the retailers are getting some amount of commercial success out of the venture, and that's really good. I'm also, paragraph 22, I'm quite fascinated about the prospect of a possible future use for the Civic Centre South in terms of museum. And I'm just wondering, if maybe a separate paper on that once we've done some of that work would be possible. Certainly some kind of presentation. I think members would be really interested in where we're going with that. So just to note those two or three items too. Okay, I'll open up to Christine, who's...
Tom Cook and John McGee.
Okay, Tom first.
Thanks, Dougie. But 3 points to pick up, and I'll just pick up on that last one you mentioned there about the Civic Centre South. I mean, I read this and I can see what the plan is, but I hadn't actually realised that we'd completed a survey of buildings and decided which ones were no longer required. I thought we were doing an exercise to look at the whole estate and decide which is surplus, but it appears from that we've decided that part of it's surplus. So it would be interesting just to see a further paper coming forward on that that can maybe set out what we are doing with that building and with the rest of the estate, and now that we're looking at probably more home working. The other 2 points, where one was you mentioned, Joe, that the education, the additional money we've got in COVID is recurring. So I take it on that basis that will now, we've now an assurance that will be built into the core funding going forward from now on. Can you maybe just answer that one? And the second one is in relation to paragraph 20, which is the overspend in the housing. Whilst I know they're small contract values, to see a 75% increase, it's a big percentage of the actual term, and maybe just some information about where that additional money came from, or why it's resulted in us having to spend so much additional money.
And through you, Chair, in terms of the recurring COVID funding, yes, clarification been given that will be built into the base. I caveat that by saying that we know that the Cabinet Secretary is undertaking a spending review. That's currently live at the moment with anticipated publishing date of around May this year. So it will be baselined, but I watch with interest the outcome of the spending review due in the spring, summertime. And in terms of the paragraph 20, I know that Simon is probably on and will be able to provide further information on that, but through you, Chair, I will also take that point away that Councillor Cook makes and come back with further information.
That's sure, I agree, that would be helpful. John McGee.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Hi, Joe. An interesting report, and it does cause me some concern because despite having been given £120 million in addition, I'm not going to call it extra money because it only takes us back to where we were, and it's only thanks to the campaign of Goslar, Stein United, that we actually got that extra money. I think you've maybe covered some of it, but I've still got to ask, folk reading this paper, we see we're going to have £6 million of cuts to our core budget. But at the same time, we're going to be able to spend millions of pounds and other things. How do we manage to tell that story so that the folk in East Ayrshire know that local government has suffered gravely again during this budget? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The points you make, Councillor McGee, are ones that will be picked up in the budget report. And as I touched on a few moments ago, that report will be fairly complex, and it will require to be carefully written to recognise the pressure on that core budget, and at the same time that additional recurring COVID money, as well as the non-recurring COVID money that we received for COVID recovery last year, that £14 million. And so it would be my intention to take yourself and fellow group leaders through that report, and to make sure that as we proceed towards the budget date later this month, that we have a report that sets out the pressures on the council, and particularly against that backdrop where there will be investment in some areas too, and from that COVID money, and obviously telling that story in a way that is understandable to not only to elected members but to residents and council taxpayers in the council.
Thanks, Joe. No, John, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is only a one-year deal. We've got to look further ahead, and just see some of the other pressures that are building up for us. And I know the government's looking at a comprehensive spending review, Westminster, UK Treasury, and need to keep our eyes on that as well. So it'll be challenging times ahead. Who's next? Simon?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to come back to a question that Councillor Cook had raised around about the adaptations projects in paragraphs 19 and 20, just to try and give a wee bit of background to that. So it's 4 adaptation projects, 4 properties that we were undertaking works to, involving extensions and internal adaptations, and they're for tenants obviously with support needs and mobility issues. So there was an understandable pressure on us to kind of try and progress these works as quickly as we could for these tenants with the needs that they had. The difficulties that Joe outlined and as noted in the report around about access to the properties during the restrictions that were in place for COVID had some issues to the project. There was a number of other things that happened. It was just one of these contracts where there was an accumulation of things that caused difficulties to the project. Our contract administrator, who works on the adaptations project, was also in a vulnerable category. He actually went on long-term sick, and we had to replace with another resource during the course of the contract, the early stages of it. We uncovered some additional structural works which had been identified, but when the contractor was on site and had removed plaster from brickwork for some structural openings, it was discovered that we needed additional steel, which caused a delay to the contract and additional costs. There was supply issues around about getting steel, which caused a time delay and costs obviously associated with that. There was also in another of the properties unrecorded drainage, Scottish Water drainage, which required Scottish Water's approval for constructing the extension over that, which took time and a delay to the contract as well, which had a cost implication. There was another instance of an incoming power supply, which turned out to be unusual and not as anticipated, and we needed to get Scottish Power in to change the cable head at that property. And then there was the actual impact of COVID on the contractor's workforce here, the number of operatives who had to go into isolation, causing delays to the contract. and extensions to the time required. And again, as with a lot of our projects, as I've noted before, we take a reasonable view with contractors in line with the Scottish Government policy notes and guidance around about COVID in terms of, you know, the financial implications on contractors of COVID and delays, and the implication of safe operating practices on site. So all these things compounded to unfortunately cause an additional cost to this project. I would say we carry out lots of these adaptation projects, and 99% of them go smoothly, and this was just one contract or two contracts over 4 properties, with one contractor that just had an accumulation of issues that compounded. So hopefully that gives a wee bit of background. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. John Roberts.
Thanks very much, Dougie. Joe, thanks for your report. It's a pretty sobering report in some aspects, and it kind of highlights the challenges going forward, and it's going to be the same for every country, every council length and breadth of the UK. Simon, thanks a lot for your explanation in terms of paragraphs 19 and 20. It's a good explanation. I'm quite happy with that. Just on the aspect of the occupational therapists linking into aids and adaptations, sometimes these works take forever to do. And I know it's been raised before, but Joe, can we maybe have a look at seeing what we can do in terms of getting some of these occupational therapist referrals carried out maybe a wee bit more quickly, and that can link into the aids and adaptations being carried out a wee bit more quickly as well. And we can have a look at that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Tom.
Thanks, thanks, Dean. No, I just wanted to thank Simon for that explanation. That's, you know, good explanation, and I'm quite happy with that. Can just go back to Joe. I'm not sure, Joe. At the end, you said you would take it away, excuse me, and get back. Was that in relation to the Civic Centre South we're talking about? Because I said I hadn't been made aware that we'd effectively declared part of the Civic Centre surplus to requirements, and we're looking at another use for it. But maybe we can clarify that one.
Through you, Chair, yes, agreed to take away that point that was raised around that location and around the further detail of the anticipated use. Bring that back, arranged through Annika and colleagues in FMPM.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, Joe, continue.
Thank you, Chair and members. We're on page 12 of the covering report now, and it just shows the expanded detail around the revenue section of our service budgets. And it just touches on the points I made earlier, but even that first table, that education table, it shows that in relation to that core education budget, it is overspending by £568,000. There's a plan just to use £1.2 million of the £2.5 million of COVID recurring money, which flips that to the underspend of 671, and then the allocation of the COVID recovery money that Cabinet agreed way back in August brings it to the 968. So you're seeing before you that where you're seeing underspend, there is stories behind that, particularly in relation to that core budget, and that will be expanded further as we go through subsequent reports. It shows for finance and ICT an underspend, and that's relating to the timing of my service redesign. And in governance, that underspend is due to employee cost savings and that over-recovery of planning and building warrant income. In communities and economy on page 13, you see the group of services as listed. They are blocks of red, which shows that they are at variance with their budget. Some are overspending, some are underspending, and it shows just in numeric form, you know, the real pressures that services are facing with supply chain, but also with COVID. The details are expanded in detail below. And we're seeing, for example, in Ayrshire Roads Alliance, that outturn reflects the shortfall of parking income, but recognising that Cabinet earlier gave contribution from the COVID recovery money for that pressured budget. And in facilities and property management, an under recovery of income in respect of Ponds Mill, and also an under recovery of school meals and corporate catering. And again, a contribution made for that. And what we're seeing in this, not just in these services, but in all the services, is that contribution that Cabinet gave at period 4 report in August, that £2 million, has really helped those budgets and taking pressure off heads of service and managers to go and deal with COVID and do with COVID recovery. But it's quite clear that as we sit here today, that that pressure is likely to continue into March next year, and we have that COVID recovery for the short to medium term, and that will be helpful in going forward. And in wellbeing, in page 14, you're seeing the budgets as listed and the different parts of that service, showing the underspends within it, culminating in that £4.6 million of that the underspend. This is money that has a call on it. It's not money that will be put in reserves and used at a later date. This is the timing of money from Scottish Government to education and to the partnership for specific purposes that they're already working on and spending. But that spend will go beyond the financial year. And in central services, just at the foot of page 14, you're seeing housing benefit and council tax benefit subsidy, and that £364,000 is due to an overspending in council tax reduction, helping those individuals and families who require support with their council tax bills because of low income. And we're actually spending more than we receive. And in the housing revenue account, again, it's a story similar to education, a story similar to the partnership, a £2.5 million underspend. And it's a service that, as Simon touched on in his early response, has been impacted by supply chain issues, by higher costs, by COVID restrictions and access, and that £2.4 million that is underspent will be retained by the housing revenue account and used to try and get those works done in conjunction with their other works as we go forward in the housing revenue account. Chair, I'm happy to stop there before moving on to People Equity Fund.
Thanks, Joe. Just a couple of wee questions I had. What's the Tesco extension? It was I'm not sure what that refers to, and I don't know if you can help with that. And just the developer contributions, are they committed? It's quite a bit of money they're building up.
The developer contributions are as listed in the page 15. They are mostly committed and have a call on them. I can provide greater detail with Cabinet. And in terms of the Tesco extension, that's a historical thing. I'll come back to you, Chair, with further details once I speak to colleagues in Roads.
Thanks. Christine, who's?
Neil McGee.
Neil McGee, Neil.
Thanks, Chair. I'm always on the delay button. Just a quick question on the other position, Joe, if you're answering it. I've been trying to get some pipeline done, and I mean it a short story long, for about 2 years now, outside the Ayrshire plant, where it's a dangerous road. There's been a number of deaths on it. Got a tree canopy, it's greasy, it's dark, and there's arctics floating out in there. And they're saying they've no money, and I do see that they're nearly £1 million in debt. Is there any sign of that improving or some support for that? Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, I think Katie's going to answer. Katie?
Thanks, Chair, to you. Councillor McGee, we'll come back to you today on that one. I'll look into it and come back to you offline on it to see what the issue is. If it's to do with health and safety, it's something we would do right away. So if you leave that with me, I'll speak to you offline.
Okay, is that okay, Neil?
Fine, Chair, thank you. Thanks, Katie.
Okay, is that us? Okay, carry on, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Page 19, members, and it's Pupil Equity Fund. We show here the breakdown of the Pupil Equity Fund by school, and I suppose it's the bottom of page 20 that is the information that I've just explained on that right hand side of the table. You can see that our total pupil equity fund allocation for this year was £5.144 million. Schools have spent £2.3 million of that to date, but are planning to commit £4 million of that by the year ending through to June. At this point in time, they are noting that £1.029 million is sitting as spend will take place, but beyond the financial year through to June. It's spend that is not fully financially committed at this stage, and this forms an intrinsic part of school improvement plans, and the management team and head teachers in schools have plans for their pupil equity fund allocation. They're supported in that by colleagues in finance and ICT in terms of financial support for that. And it notes here, just at the text part of page 20, that it's recognised that head teachers and the management team will use their pupil equity fund in a way that it will span not only financial years and academic years, but it will span different academic years, and that is contained within the guidance that is published by the Scottish Government for exceptional circumstances. And my goodness, I think we would all agree we're in exceptional circumstances. So although that's sitting as at £1 million and yet to be committed, and it probably demonstrates the pressures that head teachers and school staff are experiencing in relation to COVID, it would not be, in my opinion, unusual to make an approach to Scottish Government to have that 1.029 of that £1 million carried forward for schools and for those plans for the next academic session. Moving on to alternative delivery models, and this picks up, as members know, Ayrshire Roads Alliance and that partnership between South Ayrshire Council. It notes the strategic delivery element as well as the local delivery elements for East and for South. All through the year, we've been highlighting underspends in staffing costs at the strategic element and our reduced insurance costs. And in the local elements, these have been adjusted for the contribution that East Ayrshire Council gave to the ARA for the loss in parking income, and South Ayrshire did the same. And so we're seeing the local delivery for East underspend by £83,000 and a slight overspend in South Ayrshire. Again, dealing with winter maintenance and the like. The capital budget in the capital works ARA is listed. And it's also a page where we highlight East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. £105,000 of a planned overspend at the year end. Bob McCulloch and I meet with Annika and the team regularly to support them through that. And I think it's true to say that Annika and the team are working hard to bring that back to a break-even position. And I think from speaking to them recently, I have every confidence that they will achieve that, which will be helpful in stabilising their reserves and also in preparing them for the next financial year. And as Annika says in these meetings, and as noted in the table at page 23, the issue for Annika is around that sports area, and it's about gyms. And she has, with her management team, some plans about what gyms would look like going forward, but she's not alone in finding that a real challenging area, both in public sector and in private sector. And so at this point in time, they're working to close that gap, but really confident that they will achieve that as we go through. Chair, if I can continue, if that's okay, and just finish off my part by touching on the Treasury pages in page 25 and 26. It shows, as normal, the portfolio of debt and the Council's investment of £12 million. They are, as listed, they are in line with the Treasury Management Strategy approved by Council last March and regularly updated by Governance and Scrutiny and by members of Council at periodic times during the year. I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and take any questions on these parts or any other parts.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Anything on Joe's last couple. Tom?
Thanks, thanks, Joe. It's just going back to ARA in terms of the LED street lighting replacement. I see, there's expenditure is well down on that from what was, budgeted for. I think I understand problems with supplies and things over the last few months, but I think we should be trying to accelerate that because the energy costs, the way they're going up, I think it's, almost essential that we try and reduce our energy costs apart from our consumption. And one way to do that is to get the LED lighting completing and get the savings from that. So hopefully we can get that programme accelerated to get everything completed as quick as possible.
Yeah, I think we'd agree there. Katie?
Yeah, through you, Chair. We'll be bringing a paper on this to shared services. Some of the delay is about materials, but others, as you know, a lot of our staff from ARA helped in the response to COVID and have been moving across to different services. So we will catch up. It is important. You're absolutely sits with a net zero ambition. So you'll hear more about it, Councillor Reid, Councillor Cook, in the shared services and trying to get the catch up there.
Right, thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, I think that's it. Simon with the capital programme. Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. So the capital programme is continuing to make good progress. As I've noted before, it's despite a number of challenges around about inflation and the supply of construction materials linked to COVID and Brexit. As usual, without going through the report in great detail, if I could provide you just with an update and a selection of projects in relation to their stage of development. Projects currently on site include the restoration works at Dean Castle, where the last phases of stonework repairs are complete and internal renovation works are ongoing, and handovers programmed for this summer. We have the refurbishment and extension of Crosshouse Primary and Communication Centre, which is well advanced. However, that has incurred a delay due to the impact of COVID and material supply issues. The revised completion date's now July of this year. New build Netherford Primary School, that's progressing well. The steel frame and superstructure is now erected. And there's also a number of new build housing developments on site as part of the SHIP programme, including Witch Road in Kilmarnock, Millis Shields, Drongan and Quarry Now in Auchinleck. Projects due to start on site in the near future include St Sophia's Enerfit refurbishment, where contract awards anticipated this summer. We also have early years works at Fenwick Primary School and at Catrin, and at Dunlop Early Childhood Centre, the enabling culvert works contract is underway, with the early years new build anticipated to start in the spring. Technical designs are also being progressed for the Galston office project and the Capenacre recycling facility, with an anticipated start on site for both projects of this summer. And projects in development include Doon Valley Community Campus, where we're currently in dialogue with Scottish Government, Scottish Futures Trust and NHS to try and unlock some challenges around the affordability cap for the project. We're also progressing projects linked to the Ayrshire Growth Deal, including the core project, which is at stage 3 concept design, and tenders have recently been issued to engage with a contractor under a pre-construction services agreement. We have Moorfield Phase 3, where further site investigation works have recently been completed, and the AMIC project, the Ayrshire Manufacturing Investment Corridor, where a project programme's now been developed and a design team are now in place. So that's just a kind of brief summary of a selection of projects, Chair, but happy to answer any questions on these or any others. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. Can I just ask you 2 wee quick ones? Loanhead trees. I know that locally we could have said maybe autumn, but spring we're kind of don't want to miss out an opportunity during the growing season to plant the trees. Any further information on that one? And also Academy Stairs. I understand we're on the second set of stairs. I noticed there's certainly people working on them, and I know we a bit of criticism in the press because we just did one set of stairs, but we're now on the other set of stairs. Could you just maybe confirm that? Just for me, just those 2 wee points. I'll bring in some others.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to deal with the academy steps first, you're correct. Two separate pieces of work. The first one's completed. Second stage, the other set of steps is underway just now. That's been taken forward by our colleagues in ARA. I'm not exactly sure what the completion date it is, but the works are underway just now, and I can get an update on when they're anticipated to be completed. With the Lonehead trees, we have now agreed a replanting scheme that's been in conjunction with the school and the wider community. We've got planning permission for that, and we're just finalising arrangements to get on and do that work just now. We're in dialogue with the councillors, arboriculturist, around just some of the detail of some of that planting. So we would hope to be able to get on and get that work undertaken in the near future, certainly within this planting season.
Thanks very much, Simon. Jim Roberts first, then Tom Cook. Jim.
Thanks very much, Chair. Simon, thanks for your report. I mean, we've got an ambitious capital programme, you know, that's been well documented and publicised. But see, in regard to, you know, the problems we're experiencing with uplifts in contract prices, you know, due to labour shortages and material shortages, you know, the uplifts there. I mean, the costings we're looking at, you know, we've got definitive costings at the moment, but, you know, surely we can expect to see further ask for money in regard to some of these contracts due to the two shortages that I've mentioned. And they could be quite substantial going forward, you know, before market levels, etc. And, you know, we're seeing a kind of stabilisation in the markets. Any thoughts on that at all, Simon? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, through you, Chair. It's an issue that we're just trying to have to deal with just now, Councillor Roberts. It's challenging. We have managed to contain a lot of the impact of these increasing costs with some of the recent tender activity. Have some concerns about future projects, and we try and anticipate through the BCIS tender information just what that impact might be, but it changes kind of almost on a daily basis, so it's difficult. We're going through a review of the capital programme just now. There's a report going to be brought to Cabinet in the near future, so I'm working in conjunction with Andrew Kennedy and Alistair Kidd on that, and obviously with Joe, to look at the financial implications of some of the projects that will be coming down the track. But it is a challenge just now, and we hope that things will stabilise in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Simon.
And Simon, Tom.
Thanks, sir. Is that just a question about Cross House Primary School, the delay in the contract to July anticipated completion? Just wondering what impact that's likely to have on the pupils returning to, you know, back into the school in August. I don't know, maybe Simon or Linda could maybe answer that one better.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Through you. Yeah, at the moment the project has been delayed due to that impact of material supply, and the revised completion date is into July. It's getting very close, obviously, to the start of the new term. Still got quite a bit to go on the project, and we have concerns that, you know, if another impact does occur, it might push out that completion date. So we're monitoring things very closely at the moment, and obviously if there's any changes to that, we'll bring information back to elected members and Cabinet as quickly as we can, or as soon as we're aware of any issues that might arise.
No, thanks, Simon. Hopefully we can not get any further delays.
Okay. Well, the project's looking good. Some of the superstructures up there, and it looks good. You know, just a good fit with the rest of the village. Right at the core, right at the heart. It just changes the whole kind of dynamics of the cross at the middle of the village. Jim, did you?
Thanks, Chair. Glad to hear that the Capenaker Recycling Centre should be started around about the summer, but my question, Simon's around about the core project and over at that stage 3 design. When can we expect to see that come into planning?
Thanks, Chair, through you. We're finalising with the design team just some of the detail around about that stage 3 design, and I would anticipate a planning application being lodged within the next few weeks.
Thanks, Simon. That's great. Okay. That's it. Joe. People, is it Amanda? Sorry. Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. At the top of page 34 shows the stats for breakdown of absence statistics. Note that the working days lost per employee has increased significantly for the same period last year, now being 9.06 compared to 4.75 in the same period, which is an increase of 4.31. There's a number of factors at play in here. Last year's figures were significantly lower than what the normal figures would be, and there has, in this last period, been a significant increase in the number of absences. These continue to be monitored closely by managers and supported by my own team. Further down the page, you'll note that the highest rates reasons for absence, personal stress being the highest reason, again, continues to be closely monitored. And we work with individual cases right down to meetings with the reports to the Chief Exec, Deputy Chief Exec and Director and individual line managers. And we get support for health and safety colleagues also here. At the bottom of that page, you note that all the absences have increased in all the categories, but that was expected due to the lockdown last year, the figures being lower, and then the higher rate of absence this year. We are carrying out further analysis on the impact that what we might anticipate seeing as a result of lockdown and delayed medical interventions having taken place, and we'll report that back at a later date. Over the page 35, is the council support for employees when they're absent for work. Note an increase in activity in the absence monitoring and the occupational health. Within physiotherapy, the numbers are still lower than they were last year, but slowly creeping up, and this is a lot to do with everything had been remote, and the move back to face-to-face for physio, we anticipate that intake will increase. The employee counselling is a bit lower again than it was last year. This, I believe, is linked to our piloting of the app. Our education colleagues and facilities and property management colleagues that are in with education establishments are now using this app, and the uptake of that is increasing. We are currently looking at a view to rolling that out across all council services. Page 36, halfway down, workforce plan shows the head count. The first table for last year you'll show in the previous council structure, with this year's now being in the new structure, and shows just a slight increase over that period. Again, over the page, in page 37, the full-time equivalent has similar stats to that of the head count. Our under 25s, you'll note a very slight increase from October 21 till January 22, but when you note the table, there's been quite a significant increase from the same period last year, and this continues to be a focus area for us for workforce planning going forward. The bottom of that page shows the vacancies that have been advertised and shows an increase in the previous period. Across the page, on page 38, reflects the new employees to the council and the employees leaving the council for all reasons, significantly lower than the period before. This is partly due to the restrictions, but also the Christmas closure of the offices. And finally, on that page, there's some organisational development stats and some quotes in relation to the FACE experience, our coaching programme and spaces for listening. Happy to take any questions.
Hi, Amanda. Any questions out there? Okay. Next one's business briefing. No, sorry, I'll jump on. Davy, it's health and safety.
Thank goodness for that, Chair. I was kind of lost with business briefing. If I could just start at the top of page 40, Chair. Just at the number of non-reportable incidents. So just be seen there that there's a slight increase of 35 incidents when we compare that to 2021. And the number of non-reportable incidents over that period is also decreased by 5. The key point to note that the figures, Chair, for the reporting period last year was that 12 out of the 21 reports to HSE were due to COVID. Well, in the current reporting figures, 9 of those reports out of 16 were related to COVID infection in the workplace, and that just simply reflects the prevalence of the Omicron variant, the virus within our communities. Looking more broadly at the incidents under the heading of violence and aggression continues to be the highest cause reported, and that accounts for 63% of all non-reportable incidents that we receive. Although there were no reportable incidents to HSE, under violence and aggression for this period. The health and safety team continues to work with colleagues and services with the highest rates of violence and aggression, and with their trade union colleagues to put in place measures to reduce incidents as far as possible. Simply recognising, Chair, that as I've outlined to previous cabinets, the majority of these incidents are challenging and tend to be attributed to working with young people with dysregulated behaviours. I would also point out that we've seen a slight increase in the number of telephone and online abuse incidents that we see towards staff as well, Chair, and that's in the main due to an increased remote contact with the public because of coronavirus restrictions. I've set up a focus group involving relevant officers to look into what else can be done to prevent this type of abuse, and measures have already been put in place, like additional training for staff and additional pieces of guidance for staff, and as I said, that's already been implemented, Chair. If I could just finish with a positive news story, Chair, within page 9, section 30, the summary report will be noted that the health and safety team, in conjunction with procurement services, will shortly be launching a new community defibrillator initiative. The aim of the initiative is to make East Ayrshire a defibrillator authority within the next 5 years, where all of our communities benefit from having access to this life-saving equipment, and it will be funded wholly through voluntary donations that will be made by our contractors annually. So all the term contractors that we have on our books making annual donations. We've currently written the online application process for this, Chair, and that will be launched to allow community groups to apply for donated equipment just as soon as all the equipment pledged has been donated and we're in receipt of it, and I'll anticipate that will be done in March. Be happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, David. That's just the news at the end of that. That's excellent news. I know there's 1 or 2 communities looking for defibrillators, and I think one of the ones frequently get asked is where they're marked, and if there's any kind of wider information folk can get. So that's really good news. Who's first? Ian.
Thanks, Dougie. It's on the health and safety support given to the Galloway following the serious incident at the swimming pool. The 5 councillors who sit on the board have taken great comfort knowing we're receiving the highest quality advice. Now, I'd like to look beyond May's election. I feel strongly that the support remains for those 5 councillors that will be asked to populate the trust following the election. I think this is really important given the very serious position the trustees have found themselves in when being asked to rely on third-party advice from Law at Work, who were the suppliers of the health and safety support, in the run-up to the incident I referred to earlier.
David, do you want to comment on that?
Happy to, Chair. As it stands just now, that support will continue to be provided as we have been up to this point.
Thanks, David. Okay, Jim Roberts. Jim.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. David, that's a really good report. You've highlighted paragraph 30 in the main report, and I think that's a great initiative. I know some of the communities have already raised funds and put in their own defibrillators, but this supplements that which has already been done, and I think it's a great initiative. So a big well done between yourselves and procurement. I think my main thrust in regard to my comments here is to do with unannounced inspections. Great believer in unannounced inspections, and it's the only real way you find out what's happening there. Say for example, your contractors. Bearing in mind, health and safety overarches absolutely everything we do as a council. The function of health and safety is so important. So big well done to you, David, and a big thank you again to all the support the team's given me. Cheers.
Thanks, Jim. That's appreciated. Yep. Okay, business briefings now, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. They begin on page 43, and these are a range of performance indicators that Sets of Service have placed before Cabinet today. They begin with the page 43, noting in terms of revenues that the target date for new benefit claims is the result is well within target, and that's with a service that's, like others, feeling strain, particularly around additional work for self-isolation grants and the like. So that's really welcome to see. Building warrants and freedom of information requests are as listed as our fixed penalty notices, noting that 15 notices were issued for dog fouling by the end of December, and a really important piece of information around SL33 for members in that linkage across a whole range of services and partners to support those young people into work and into training. In communities and economy, we see a red indicator for gross rent arrears. It's similar to an indicator on council tax members. It just recognises the strain on people's ability to pay, but it also recognises the support that council put in place with that period where council tax and rents were relaxed, giving people time to deal with the pandemic. That recovery, similar to council tax, is now taking place, and over time, I'm confident that the service supported by my service and others will get that back on track. And just touching on wellbeing, and you're seeing 3 indicators there as normal. On delayed discharge, showing a 0 for that, but noting in delayed discharge bed days, the explanation given and definition given on page 47, that target, the result is slightly out with the target, but it recognises. You could use the word unique, but it doesn't begin to describe the pressures that service has faced in the last months or so, and in trying to work with colleagues in NHS Ayrshire and Arran to support them to support the acute sector. And in terms of looked after and accommodated children, they are as listed, and work continues to support those children and young people. Moving on to complaints, it notes that, as I say, in each time I do this report, that we are taking our stance from the Scottish Public Sector Ombudsman's model of complaints handling. It notes the complaints that were received in this period and those that were carried forward, and it shows just in the middle table the numbers closed and stage 1 and stage 2, noting that in terms of those 30 stage 1 complaints, 3 or 10% were fully upheld, 7 were partially upheld, and 20 were not upheld in civil information for stage 2, and for those that were escalated. It's important, as the Head of Corporate Support notes on many occasions, that we take learning from the complaints that we receive and from those that we review and consider in detail, and further details provided at the foot of page 49 in terms of those improvement actions for both my service and also for colleagues in education. And over the page it shows the breakdown by area and also the number of days taken to complete and deal with those stage 1s and stage 2s and escalated complaints. And if I can just continue, Chair, if that's okay, and moving on to risks, just to Chair, I'll stop and take any questions.
Okay. Thanks, John. No, I was just going to, in terms of the delayed discharges, I mean, it's absolutely incredible, the top figure that we've been able to continue that. It's just, I think it's said with the other 31 authorities across Scotland. And just like to thank our staff for just being able to continue to achieve that in such circumstances. Tom?
Thanks, Dave. As you say, a lot of good work going into this report, really good things happening, particularly the pressures that we've been under with the pandemic and everything. Just a minor point, and I think it's just a presentational point, but it's on page 43, and it's to do with the number of fixed penalty notices. We've set a target of 3, said we've issued 3, so it's all green. Somebody looking at that from the outside could be saying, well, your target, where do you get your target of 3 and you've met it, so you just pack up at that point. I suppose if we're being realistic, the target for fixed penalty notices should actually be 0, because nobody should be dropping litter or having dog fouling. So maybe just a presentational thing as we go forward to say, we're actually showing that figure correctly.
Thanks, Tom. I was looking at the top of page 44 and it's saying 15 penalty notices for dog fouling. So I don't know where that comes into the 3. But I know they're out and about there, and that's the main thing, I suppose. But can maybe get some clarification there. Claire, you've got your hand up.
Thanks. Actually, I was going to pick up on the same point as Tom there. However, again, back on page 43, it's just a quick question. It's the percentage of freedom of information requests. How many, or you can come back with this one, but how many are actually already in the public domain and are on our websites? Because I've heard this is what's happening. The information is actually out there, but people are asking for freedoms of information. So, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Joe?
And through you, Chair, I'm not sure we would have that information. You know, it's what we do as a council and do as individual services. We actually, where we can, we publish relevant information on that website. When an FOI comes in, then we divert that, we refer that FOI inquirer to the relevant page on the website for those that are already published.
David?
Just on the back of the point there from Councillor Maitland, Chair, when you're responding to FOI requests, you're entitled to have regard to your publication scheme. So anything that you routinely report or publish, as Joe said, on the website or otherwise, anything you routinely report to Cabinet or Council, anything you can point to has already been in the public domain, strictly speaking, then you can respond to an FOI. You still have to respond, but the response isn't a formal response. Here's the information you've asked for. It's a signpost to there's the information you've asked for over there. You wouldn't record necessarily the outcome to them in that way, but it's certainly something within the services I'm dealing with just now, planning, etc., since the management restructure, where it's about trying to actually get people to remember and rely on the publication scheme. But very often people will ask for something that falls within the publication scheme, but they may then want a little bit more. So very few fall directly within. We just point them to the website, and there aren't other elements that you actually need to deal with because they usually come in a wee bit more complicated packaging. But that is the general position. But we still need to say to people, we're not responding under FY, but there it is in the publication scheme because no response isn't an option. It's a shorter response because information is already in the public domain, but we still need to respond, whether it's to signpost them or give a substantive response under FY.
Okay, thanks, David. That's helpful. Thanks, Joe, as well. Okay, I don't see any more hands. Joe, over to about risks, page 51.
Thank you very much, Chair and members. The risks are as noted. They haven't been added to or amended since the last report, nor has the priority for each risk been changed either. Just noting at paragraph, this risk number 1A around that economic climate, it notes in that paragraph the information around the settlement that was produced on 9th of December. Just to let members know that last week at the stage 1 debate in Parliament, as members no doubt know, funding of £120 million was allocated in addition to the 9th of December money to local government. We are waiting to see our distribution, our allocation from that. We expect it to be around £2.7 million, but clarity will be provided soon on that one. And in terms of the other pressures, what we are seeing and touched on in the other reports around that economic climate and those risks are recorded as 1A, B and C. We are seeing that pressure in the core budget of the council, but we're also seeing in terms of 1C an increased pressure on applications for Scottish Welfare Fund. We are dealing with those applications specifically for crisis grants, which have a 2-day turnaround. But we're seeing an increased number, and we're seeing an increased applications for support with food, but with energy costs as well, which is something that we have the budget for in Scottish Welfare Fund to deal with. But it's important that I flag up to members at this point in time. That's a new trend we begin to see, and it's probably one of those trends that we'll see as COVID begins to change, that the pressures placed upon the communities and on the council will change as well. In terms of equal pay and OpenCast, they are as listed. There's been no change to them. And we continue to, in terms of risk number 7, that fraud and misappropriation, and we're seeing in the press particularly large-scale sums of write-offs from government around COVID fraud, and really reassuring in terms of the work that Aidan Mackay and her team have done to work alongside colleagues in economic development, colleagues in finance and ICT to embed audit within those processes, and it's paid dividends. And we now have the National Fraud Initiative outcomes for COVID grants, and no issues have been highlighted, and that's really testimony to the work of staff in the council, but moreover to colleagues in internal audit who were really pragmatic in their support for businesses and for individuals who needed those grants, and did so in a way that minimised the risks of fraud and misappropriation, which is really helpful. And in terms of the pandemic, risk number 11, we receive regular updates from Craig and also from Chief Executive on this, and they are the latest update is as listed there. Chair, that concludes East Ayrshire Performs. The recommendations for Cabinet today are contained on paragraph 3 at page 3 of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions on the final part of the report.
Okay, I don't see any hands up, so I think we'll just go straight. Oh, sorry, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Joe, I don't know whether this is one you can answer for me today. I'm aware of an outbreak of the disease in some of our trees were ash trees. It's a national issue. I'm just wondering what kind of impact that's going to have on us going forward, both on our kind of health and safety, as far as these trees, if they collapse and houses are falling about us, and on our overall budget for it, how we're going to deal with this.
And through you, Chair, it's an issue that we know about. It's an issue that's on the ARA and Housing Risk Register. Kevin is progressing this in both East Ayrshire and South Ayrshire. It's an issue that's also been discussed at Directors of Finance, and that there's an issue now to deal with trees, those ash trees that have that disease. We've also alerted our insurer on this issue, and Kevin is currently collating information from the routine inspections that are undertaken of our trees, and agreed to come back to see me and clearly with elected members at a later date as well, in terms of the action plan that he will devise to deal with that issue. It will be costly, members, and worryingly, it will be a revenue cost and not a capital cost, but it's something that Director of Finance are taking forward, but we are really pragmatic in this council in terms of taking it forward, and work Kevin is doing so, and he'll meet with me and we'll clearly do a report to members in due course on that point. But reassured today that we've got that risk, we've got that on the risk register. We have the register of those trees and they're being inspected, and we are preparing that action plan to deal with this ash dieback issue.
Thanks, Joe. Just Simon's still there. When you're planting the trees at Loonhead, that ash trees are off the menu. Jim Roberts.
Thanks very much, Dougie. Joe, can I just take you back to the main paper, please? But it does link into risk management. It's to do with paragraph 32 and the black start. Now, we all know, we've read in the press and media that Hunterston B is going to be shutting down. I mean, that was capable of powering every house in Scotland. So the capacity of the grid, has been reduced. So we've got the issue that's going on in Ukraine with the gas pipelines, etc. So I think black start becomes even more relevant in terms of the grid shutting down. I think it's a good one to put in the risk register. But my fundamental question is our own emergency generator sitting at the back of London Road. Can you maybe get me some details as to how many times that's trial run, weekly basis, monthly basis, or whatever? Because I think that's an important one going forward. Thanks, Joe.
There we are. Every 2 weeks for 20 minutes it runs. Thanks for the council officer there for the contribution. There you are. Okay, and Katie's there.
Yeah, Chair, it was just to follow up that we will provide a briefing. Andrew Kennedy's leading in Black Start. We've now had a couple of exercises in that on a multidisciplinary basis, and we right across our partnership, so we can give you an update more generally on what we're doing around Black Start. There's been quite a lot of concerted effort around this in recent months.
Thanks, Katie. Jim, did you want back in? Tom's wanting in? Yeah.
Yeah, just to come in on the back of that, I'm just wondering how many times that when the generator starts, it actually starts on full load. We put it onto full load or just runs, because I think that's essential that we have a load test on it very regularly. And in terms of Black Start in general, I think we have to build into whatever plans we have in communication, because if we've no telephones, no radios, we need to have a way of communicating. So I think we need to make sure we've got a community a community resilience team of people who will go and knock on doors to look after people, because that's the only way we'll be able to communicate with them. Thanks.
Katie will bring that forward, I think, in the future report. Yeah, good, good. Okay, I think that's everybody. So just back to the recommendations on page 3, paragraphs. Can we agree the recommendations? Okay, and the next item is the review of service balances, and you're on again, Joe.
Thank you, Chair and members. You know, this is the report that comes this time of year. It comes following the conclusion of the external audit of the annual accounts, and it notes in this paper at the table at paragraph 5 the reserves that are noted in the accounts, and the reason they're noted in accordance with the CITFA code for local government, and they are as listed. And you know that they are listed in almost crude sense. They're just put down as figures. What it doesn't show is that the majority of those balances listed at that table are committed, and that's an important point. That is shown in that way. What the report then does is it takes the service balances at paragraph 5 and it expands them further at paragraph 6 and shows the traffic that's gone through those balances and shows the extent to which they are committed and uncommitted. And it shows that £41.7 million of those balances is committed and 1.2 million is uncommitted. And uncommitted, and it's right and proper that services do have the opportunity to hold uncommitted balances to use them, as we've seen in the report earlier on, housing and communities and economy utilising some of those uncommitted balances for various things. As part of the East Ayrshire Reforms report that we've just approved, and as part of preparations for that report, I meet with heads of service to go through their budget and go through their financial plans. And as part of the period 10 exercise that was undertaken for the report, I also took the opportunity to go through the service balances with heads of service. I think it's the right thing to do that we acknowledge that service balances that were listed in Appendix 1 were listed with the best of information and the best of intentions, but clearly a balance that was created in 2020 for a specific purpose may be seen in different light following the issues that we're experiencing with the pandemic. And so services have quite rightly taken the opportunity to rebadge some of those service balances for more up-to-date and more current pressures. And they are as listed on Appendix 1. The conclusion of the report asks members to note that £150,000 from service balances within finance and ICT have been released and will be added to the general fund uncommitted balance. Chair, it's an exercise that we do each year. It's one that services are used to, and it's an intrinsic part of the Council's reserve strategy. So service balances should not be seen negatively. They're a fundamental part of sound financial management, because without them and without that reserve strategy, we'd be back in the bad old days when services were spending to budget at 31st of March. Our reserve strategy lets service underspend, and where they underspend, to take that forward into the following year. Where services overspend, to take that as a first hit against the next year's budget. And so that, Chair, is the balances report, and happy to pause there and take any questions.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions? That's quite clear. Okay, if there's no questions, can we go straight to recommendations? Can we agree recommendations? Yeah. Okay, that's the end of the E items. Okay, so just one more item, and that's item 4, the Central ICC, and that's a note at the minute of the meeting of the 9th of December. That's just for note. Can we agree to know it? And I think that's us. Thanks very much for everybody's attendance. Thank you all.